The Shroud of Turin is about to be examined in a way it has never been before. The most famous thing about the shroud now is that it is a medieval fake, and not the burial cloth of Christ as millions of people have believed. That was the verdict of a carbon-14 test done exactly 20 years ago. But the irresistible force of science seems to have hit an immovable object. New evidence has appeared which contradicts the results of the carbon-14 test. So, why won't this image of a naked and battered man just lie down and die?
There's one very good reason. No one has been able to work out how the forger did it. No one, despite many attempts, has been able to produce an image with the same physical characteristics. It's a mystery.
And into this vacuum has rushed a new and for many unthinkable question. Is it, after all, not the shroud that may be found wanting, but the carbon-14 test applied to it?
On the 20th anniversary of that test, physicists are preparing a new carbon-14 test. It will show if the original carbon-14 test could have lied. So just what is the new evidence relating to the Shroud of Turin? And could it resurrect the shroud as the most potent relic of Christianity?
I'm embarking on a journey that will span 3 continents and take me to the very heart of Christian history and to the people that have closely examined the shroud. Turin sits in the plain at the foot of the Alps in northern Italy.
This is the home of the shroud, the Cathedral of John the Baptist.
Well, this is quite a moment for me. My first awareness of the shroud came when I was at school in the 80s. A lot of new research appeared to hold out the prospect that it was indeed the most important relic in Christendom. The last time the shroud was shown was in 2000, and it's not due to be seen again until 2010 at the earliest. Visitors have to make do with the sight of its fireproof case. But already there's a surprise in store. Something remarkable has just happened. News has come to me from the Cardinal's secretary.
The Cardinal has agreed for its veil to be lifted for us.
In this side chapel, the windows are being blacked out and the humidity and temperature carefully measured.
Under considerable secrecy, this room is being prepared so that our camera teams can film the shroud for the first time in high definition.
While the preparations take place, I want to understand the key features of the shroud. The first thing that strikes you is that since the carbon-14 test, the Church makes no claims for its authenticity, but it does maintain its importance as an object of devotion. Behind that glass and beneath that cover lies the finest Italian engineering, designed to keep it safe and in an atmosphere of inert gas monitored minute by minute. Professor Bruno Barberis is the curator of the museum dedicated to the shroud. And a visit to the museum begins with a film. An intriguing revelation is that throughout its history, the shroud has often been displayed in public. It may seem like a trivial detail, but it could be important to the investigation. Could the shroud have been contaminated in any way and so distort its true age? Another relevant detail is that artists have tried to imagine how the cloth must have been wrapped around the body to create the image of the front and back. The answer could shed light on the age of the cloth. In 1532, a fire melted the metal box in which the shroud was kept, and it left behind a geometrical pattern of burns. Miraculously, the image was preserved intact. And finally, a piece of information that goes to the heart of the debate over the age of the shroud. All we can know for certain is that before Turin, the shroud can only be reliably traced back to the village of Lire in France, where it was in the possession of this man, Geoffroy de Charnay, who first exhibited it in 1360. That date is very significant because carbon-14 dates the shroud at 1325, plus or minus 65 years. It all seems to check out. My first impression of the shroud, then, is that, on the face of it, it would make sense to dismiss it as medieval forgery. But as I'm about to discover, there is more, a great deal more to this cloth than meets the eye. The day for the filming has arrived. These will be the first high-definition moving images ever taken.
We are turning over. We're running up.
To protect it, only the minimum amount of light is used. It took me a while to pick everything out, but then it became quite clear. Lying between the geometric patches from the fire, the image of the front and back of a man's body, with what seem like scourge marks, and the very specific wounds of a crucifixion. The cloth itself is about 4 meters of linen with traces of cotton. It has a distinctive herringbone weave and the scorches from the 1532 fire. These show it was once folded in 48. And another curious set of L-shaped scars show that at one time it must also have been folded in 4. These observations could be important. This is the image the shroud reveals to the naked eye. But with the help of some technology, the eye can see more. By first removing the color and then reversing light and shade, we create a negative of the image. Photography first captured this a century ago, but today it can be done at the press of a button. This is a clearer image of the figure on the cloth. This is the true positive. It's the image on the cloth that is in fact a negative.
This is the camera which revealed to the world a much clearer image of the shroud. In its negative form, the shroud was somehow more recognizable and easily discernible. And what's more, photography meant that the image of the shroud could travel far and wide, and interest in it began to grow around the world.
For believers, the appeal was irresistible. The shroud seemed to hold out the promise of a tangible contact with Christ himself at the crisis of his suffering on the cross. And here were the key identifiers, the wounds from the lance in the side, and the crown of thorns. But carbon-14 ended that hope, and many religious hearts were broken. A couple of generations have since grown up knowing almost nothing about the shroud, but whatever the result of the carbon-14 test, the shroud has remained an enigma.
And the enigma is this. If the Shroud of Turin is a medieval fake, then how exactly was the image forged?
Lying in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains in the United States is Colorado Springs. It's the home of the man who has studied the shroud closer and longer than anyone else. John Jackson is a doctor in cosmology and lecturer in physics. Together with his wife Rebecca, he runs the Turin Shroud Center of Colorado.
The first thing we come to is a photographic model.
Through his research, he has had one of the few full-size, high-definition still images of the shroud for some time.
That exists anywhere in the world for scientific.
In 1978, when interest in the shroud was at its height, he led a large team of scientists to Turin, where they examined the shroud for a week. No one since has secured such full access to the cloth.